Our look around expansion with today the UT perspective. Kyle Carpenter from Longhorn Republic comes in, is going to tell us all this stuff and give us the Texas perspective on the expansion. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no problem. Let's go back in time a little bit first. We were just talking about this a little bit off air, but the Texas flirtation with the Pac-10 back in 2010, and how close did that actually come to happening, and anything that come out of that that would be relevant to an SEC fan right now?
Well, I'll say this. So we've had, geez, it's crazy. As many head coaches we've had, we've also had three athletic directors since then. But DeLoss Dodds was the athletic director at the time, and he told me kind of off the record, I'm sure the statute of limitations has expired. But he said to me then that when the ground got a little shaky and things got a little tense, you looked around the room and there was only two people, and I think you'll be able to infer who he was talking about here without him or I saying it. There was only two people in the room who kept their wits about him, and it was OU was the other one who felt like had calm heads. Basically, what DeLoss told me was that wherever they went, it would be a package deal. And so when the Pac-12 or Pac-10, I guess at the time, was happening, I think it was always a package deal similar to what we're seeing now. I think that's just such a tried and true rivalry with OU that it was always going to happen together. I think it was very close. I mean, I think when Nebraska left the Big 12 originally, it was an interesting time. I think Texas tried to look at, what's the best for them. And we're not going to sit here and lie and try to make Texas look benevolent and all this. They were looking for the bottom dollar, what's best for them. We had a president at the time also who was very came from California, had an idea of really moving Texas academics into kind of the public Ivy realm, and really wanted to like the idea of Pac-12 or Pac-10 as well because of the academics. So at that point, I think the stars were aligned very much so that if there was a move, it was going to be that. Obviously, didn't end up coming to fruition again by about this much, but the rest is history. We had a few years of the Big Ten, and we're here to talk, I guess, future.
Yeah, and which the future looks like the SEC. Now, moving into this year, what do you know about when this started, how this started? Because for most of us, this is about a week long at this point.
Yeah, here's what I'll say. Texas has there's a lot of schools with big donors. Texas has big donors. Texas has an inordinate amount of medium to big donors. A lot of people who like to be in the room and like to show that they have some information or some clout. So it doesn't usually stay under wraps for 6 months, right? It really doesn't. So kudos to keeping it close to the chest for Chris Del Conte, the athletic director, the Board of Regents at Texas, new president Hartzell. I think they absolutely kept this just as close as they could. The fact that it came out, a week before, and all these things that we're seeing now are basically the dominoes are already falling. It was too late for anything to scuttle or to happen. Again, knock on wood, I guess we have a couple official steps to go through still as we're recording this. But yeah, I think the fact that for, again, the believed timeline is around 6 months when it was engaged. But I mean, Texas has been looking and been thinking for a while. I think, again, if there was conversations happening, they were happening between Texas and OU, and what do we do next? And I think that's happened for a couple of years. I think, independent was something people thrown around. I don't always think it was the best, but I think when it became realistic, when you looked at the shifting landscape of college football and going to something beyond what we've known for the past 60 years, just conferences aren't really as important when you look at the playoffs expanding and what's coming, name and image likeness. I mean, the whole landscape of college football is shifting. And so it just felt probably, I imagine, like a pretty good time for Texas and OU to take their shot and go to, the premier college football conference in the country.
Yeah, and when A&M and Missouri made the jump 10 years ago, it went like this. They removed themselves from the Big 12.
Yep.
Then they asked for admission into the SEC. Then the invite came, and then the Board of Regents accepted.
Yeah.
And Thursday, there, as we know, the SEC presidents and chancellors are meeting. And Friday, there's a Board of Regents meeting at Texas and Oklahoma.
Right.
So this is all trend. This is like that game that's like 97% chance of winning at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, there are a lot of ways that Texas has been inept in some of its hires, some of its ways it's run the program in recent years. But I don't think they swing this big without knowing the answer already, right? I think the folks who mattered at both Texas and OU, when this news story broke with the Houston Chronicle, and I'm sitting here in Houston, Texas, and when that broke, I'll just say it's been a little crazy here, but and it's been crazy everywhere, of course. But when that broke, I don't imagine that there was a wave of fear that went into any of the folks responsible. I think it was okay, here it is, but everything was dominoes were ready to fall. Again, an act of God, an act of Congress, or something else extreme, right? It barring any of those, it was pretty close to a done deal by the point that this became news to all of us.
Well, what was the reaction on social media? How is this news being taken on in Austin?
Well, yeah, it depends who you ask. I will say in Austin, it's people are very excited. Again, Texas sports is in a good spot. Texas football hasn't been in a great spot. We did the analysis on our podcast kind of a few months ago, but this is the single worst decade in the history of UT football. They've never had a lower winning percentage over a 10-year span in the history of their football program. In that time, they still managed a couple top 10 finishes. Last year, in a really disappointing year, they had a top 20 finish where, again, they were less than 2 touchdowns away from being undefeated. I don't think they were an undefeated team. I'm not saying that, but there is some perspective that the step into the SEC football conference is exciting, but Texas is excited. Fans I've seen are excited for the baseball. We're going to have LSU, Vandy, Mississippi State, these teams that are elite, where Texas, had a chance to be where Mississippi State sat if they didn't, just play the heck out of those games and win the thing. In volleyball, they lost to Kentucky in the national championship. In men's basketball, they had a top 10 finish. They crashed in the tournament. But, there's this idea that you bring Texas and OU and add them to SEC sports, not just SEC football, but SEC sports in general, that you're effectively going to have the best conference in almost every sport. That it has to be assumed that Texas football is going to continue on the trajectory. SEC can only help the brand, the recruiting, and hopefully Coach Sarkisian is able to bring the know-how and take that next step up. But I think there's overall enthusiasm. You might see the occasional person who maybe is a little scared, just because, again, if you're a new fan and you've only lived through the past 10 years, it hadn't been great to beat Texas. You haven't had a lot of 10-win seasons, which is the standard, I think. So other than them, I would say 90 some odd percent are overwhelmingly excited to play the best teams, to be in the best conference, and just to have this new exciting thing. It's I'll tell you, no offense to the folks in Ames, Manhattan, Kansas, or out in West Virginia, those aren't necessarily road trips that a bunch of people are taking, right? Getting to LSU, A&M, obviously, Arkansas is a lot easier for the folks from Texas. Driving down Interstate 10, getting to a bunch of the schools, Mississippi all the way to Florida, is a little bit easier than getting to Ames, Iowa. Trust me. So I think people are excited. This actually feels very natural.
Yeah, and I believe, just a little bit of shade, but I believe Ole Miss is going to leave with the highest winning percentage ever on the Longhorn Network. And that leads me into, what are they going to do with the Longhorn Network?
I mean, look, I'll be candid. I think you're basically going to get another station for the SEC network, right? I think so. I have a lot of friends who work or have worked or work currently in the Austin studio. A lot of good people there. They're doing a lot of good work. My hope, and I've reached out to a few, is that they're not left in the wind in all of this. I think it makes a lot of sense if the SEC network just takes their infrastructure, some good talent there, and basically just expands that brand. I don't think the Longhorn Network is going to be a thing. I think it came out of, like I said, those contract negotiations post Nebraska when UT kind of redistributed the revenue share from, I believe, 57% to 76%, basically, more revenue for the other Big 12 teams, but said we still have our tier 3 rights. We're going to get as much as we can for them. And when the idea that they could get as much money as they did for what it was, right? I mean, it was a no-brainer. I think it, may not have been the greatest thing in hindsight. You get to be the butt of a lot of jokes, but the idea, how do you pass it up when ESPN offers it to you, right? And they made a lot of money in the process. But I think there will probably be, because there's time left on that deal, a payout that comes from ESPN's side. So when we talk about payout between UT to the Big 12, there may be a balance there. So I don't see any downside, except again for the few folks who are working at the Longhorn Network, and if hopefully they will be smart and keep all them and roll them in and into the ESPN family and let them keep their jobs. Otherwise, I don't really see a downside to it going away.
Yes, and the idea that I had with the guy from OU, and when I've talked about this, is basically an SEC West
Right.
network to go with an SEC East and have an overarching streaming service over the top. And I think you can just print money at that point, because the games that are going to be added just from Oklahoma and Texas, the marquee games coming into the SEC, the catalog that's going to be available to Disney is going to be unmatched south of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And look, I mean, the division with the Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, and Redskins last year, you could argue, was probably less fun and big boy football than what you're talking about. Again, no shots at those teams, but yeah, I think it is. And I see a future where down the road, as we figure out what, if it's 4 Super 16 team conferences or whatever it looks like, there's a future where basically this SEC conference, as it's growing, and again, who knows what next or future expansions may even look like, but as it's growing and adding in these blue bloods and these elite brands to what it already has, which is obviously elite football, you are basically going to get the equivalent to a AAA minor league to the NFL. And then I think there's going to be AA, single A, right? And that's, again, no offense to those people who get left behind, whether that's former Big 12 folks or other conferences that are kind of group of 5 now. I think you will see kind of that stratification where you have a kind of a top tier, and that's just natural. That's where we've been going for a few years, and I think that's really where this move kicks us down the road of.
Well, what I've been a big proponent of during this whole thing is the big winner from this expansion is Arkansas. They get you guys back. They've wanted that ever since. They haven't really been able to find a rival during their whole time in the SEC. And now they have that weird situation where they have Oklahoma, but they've only played them 14 times or something in their history, which is the weirdest thing, as close as they are. But I think I am really happy for Arkansas to have you guys in Oklahoma coming in.
Yeah, it feels like Oklahoma Arkansas should be a bigger rivalry, but like I said, in not wasn't an intentional shot at historic rivals Arkansas when I mentioned the SEC baseball and didn't mention them. Mea culpa. They are an elite baseball program for sure. I'm not here to take shots and talk about the fact that they didn't haven't ever won a national championship, but that's not what I'm here to do. But they are truly an elite program in baseball. So that rivalry right there has already had some fire. We've played the last couple of years, and we've played in football a couple of times, and we're playing this year in football. And we had Arkansas folks on our podcast doing a preview for that. And as a younger guy in the younger generation, I kind of worried when I asked where do you put Texas on your kind of biggest rivals? And I was surprised, because I think the older generation of fans absolutely holds on to that really tightly. And I think even more so for Arkansas than older Texas fans. But I think because they're playing, you're going to see that renewed all the way top to bottom. And that's not a bad thing. We actually said kind of jokingly, if we needed to go to a 12-team Big 12, we joked on the podcast, we would gladly take Arkansas in the Big 12. I like this arrangement way better of us coming into here. But yeah, I agree. I think that'll be fun. I think there's some good old-fashioned hate there and between the two. And it'll be, proximity, it makes sense. And again, the history is obviously there.
Yeah, and who do you think, looking into the SEC, who's your unintentional rival that's going to develop? That team that you're not thinking about, you're not expecting right now, but just something weird happens, it turns into a weird game, and it just becomes a thing.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I have thought about this. I think about it from the where do I want to go to road trips. I think the thing that I'm most excited about this move is I kick myself because I didn't take the chance, which I thought might be the only time in my lifetime to see a game at Ole Miss go in the Grove while UT was playing there, and I didn't go to that game, and I again feel like an idiot for doing it. Now I feel a little better, but I think we've played a couple times. There's been an Ole Miss UT game, which has been good. I don't know if that'll flourish, but you have cities. They're obviously of pretty large size difference in the towns, but have kind of a similar ethos of just the. I think you can make a comparison between them. So I almost feel like that might be a gentleman's rivalry. I kind of wonder again because of the multiple sports if Mississippi State ends up becoming something of a rival. If it feels like they had some heat in the baseball rivalry that started this year that could carry over. It could be a weird one, right? It could be something like I hope it's not South Carolina. It could be. Who I would like is Georgia. We have the mascots that started the rivalry.
Yeah, right.
I have a lot of family in the Atlanta area. I would make a good rivalry for me if somehow UT and Georgia could form one. I know they're not particularly close, but Austin to Atlanta at least is not a terribly long fight with two big airports. The quick drive to Athens there. But yeah, I hope it's. I'm gonna call Georgia the one. I don't know how
Okay.
likely it'll be to see what the pods and the schedules look like, but I think that would be a good one.
All right. Kyle Carpenter from Longhorn Republic coming by to talk all about the expansion and the Texas perspective of it. Man, Kyle, thank you so much for coming by today. And we have to do this again once you guys get a little closer.
Hey man, once we get in here and we start throwing our elbows around trying to make some room, man, just remember, some of us are all right. There's some good ones, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you very much. Kyle Carpenter, Longhorn Republic, right here. Hotty toddy.